Good evening and welcome to a new episode of Age of Geek. I'm Robert.
I'm Collin.
I'm Marlee.
I'm James.
And we are going to talk about the season 1 of X-Men 97. First off, Collin, never mind, I'm looking at the wrong thing. That is awesome. I'm looking at the completely wrong thing. I feel like a super genius right now. We're going to start off with a couple of bits of news, and then we're going to just dive right into the episodes. We're going to do a quick run through of each episode. We're going to treat Tolerance's Extinction as one episode for this, and then I apologize in advance. We're going to really geek out. So, with that,
Don't apologize.
Well, I mean, it's going to be kind of sappy.
Sorry.
I'll apologize for
sorry.
me. How about that? But yeah, here we go. So let's see. First off, we'll keep kind of X-Men related. Keep our first topic X almost centric. Rob Liefeld, who is the co-creator of Deadpool, finally promises that he is retiring from Deadpool for real this time. It's like, Rob, I believe it when I see it, but when you've got a character that's had the kind of career that Deadpool has had in the Fox and Marvel and comics universes, I can't blame him for going, just one more time. He is going to be teaming Deadpool up with a number of different characters this summer, leading into tie-ins to Marvel's and Disney's MCU crossover Deadpool and Wolverine. He is keying in pairing up with different Marvel characters in each of his Deadpool team-ups 5 issues. So he's going to have Wolverine for one, naturally. He'll have Gwen Stacy, Ghost Spider, the Hulk, kind of a forgotten character named Crystar, which is oddly, what's the word I'm looking for? Well-timed, because Hasbro has released a Marvel Legends Crystar figure in one of their most recent waves. So it's like, why would you have this character come up? Here's why. So you can have your Deadpool and some of your favorite characters or characters you've never heard of before in comic form. Let's see. We also have some Daredevil news for certain heroes of Hell's Kitchen.
I was hoping you were going to bring this up.
Well,
if
we'll
you
see
didn't, I would.
We'll see if it's the bit of news that you were thinking of. In fact, looks like Deadpool, the Daredevil, not Deadpool reboot, was originally not going to cross over at all with the Netflix series. So Born Again was going to be standalone, but as recently as the past few weeks, Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio have had conversations about how it does actually cross over with what has come before, and kind of tying it in better with the MCU version of Daredevil that we've seen briefly in Echo and She-Hulk. Was this what you were going for? Or were you going for something else? The other guy in a red outfit.
I mean, no,
he wasn't Daredevil in that. He was just Matt Murdock.
Oh, okay. No, I was just gonna bring it up too, because now we have a release date for March of 2025. The interesting thing though that I don't know, maybe you guys have seen differently, but like the whole time everyone was saying that it was supposed to be 18 episodes. But then with this more recent announcement from Disney, there's only 9. So it's like, wait, are they splitting it up into 2 seasons, or did they crunch it all down into 9 when they redid everything?
Oh, that I do not know.
It might be that they went the Netflix route and are doing hour-long episodes rather than what Disney has done with their shows, where they have it between 30 and 40 minutes. So instead of doing 18 like 30 to 40 minute episodes, they're just doing 9 hour-long episodes.
Well, either way, the internet, nobody knows for sure. Like, some people say, oh yeah, it's 18 episodes. And then other people say it's 9. And I actually heard it from the man himself, Mr. Kingpin, that there was 18 episodes.
Well, if the Kingpin says it,
Him
it's got to
at
be true.
FanX.
It better be true.
But that was also before they like redid the series.
Yeah.
Because I talked to him at FanX in 2022. Yes, 2022. So anyways, we'll see. But the fun thing too is that they did confirm that John Bernthal's Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, is going to be in this one. So that's fun. Anyways, what else do you got, Robert? We can keep talking about Daredevil if you guys want.
I know that you would love that if we
but
did.
I should probably stop.
Yeah, we did promise people some X-Men talks. We should probably get to that at some point.
Yeah.
Fine.
Jeez.
Just a little bit.
Just a little. But the last thing that I had was it looks like there is another name that's been thrown into the fire, so to speak, who wants to be Ghost Rider for the MCU. It has been known that Keanu Reeves has mentioned that he wants to be. But now Ryan Gosling has thrown his name in as wanting to be Ghost Rider as well. And he wants to, I do believe he also wants to be the, did they say it was Catch or Cage? And they haven't said which. But now, Kevin Feige has to choose between Ken or Constantine for his Ghost Rider, if not somebody else altogether.
Interesting.
I just want me some Nicolas Cage back.
But you are getting him as Spider-Man Noir in a live action.
It's true. Very true.
Wait, did you say live action?
Yeah, they're doing live action.
Wait, I thought it was animated.
Oh no, live action Spider-Man Noir with Nicolas Cage as a older Peter Parker.
Oh my gosh, even better.
I'm
I
sorry.
seriously thought it was cartoon.
Wait a minute, I surprised you on this?
Wow.
I thought it was animated.
Hey.
Wow.
I love it.
Oh my gosh, I need to make sure Jason knows about this. He loves Nicolas Cage.
Oh, great. Well, I'm glad that I was able to bring you a little something that you were not aware of to the table. That makes me feel good. I've done my job.
Welcome. You're welcome.
Yes. All right. Does anybody else have any other geeky news outside of surprising Marlee to talk about?
Yeah.
Go for it.
So, gaming wise, got two different things. Within the last week here, we've gotten some trailers from Assassin's Creed new series Shadows, the real history behind Yasuki and Nobunagai. I don't know how to say these. I'm butchering them. It's terrible. Anyways, they're going Samurai Age, which is very different.
Ooh.
And they're also following two different characters instead of just one. So
Interesting.
All right.
I haven't played an Assassin's Creed game in many moons because they all just seem the same to me.
You're one up on me because I haven't played an Assassin's Creed game ever.
I've only attempted Valhalla.
I think I stopped before Valhalla. I played almost a little bit of the rest of them.
Yeah, I played like 25% of the first three, and then played a little bit of Black Flag, and then jumped into Valhalla. But then the PS5 came out, and I tried to move my PS4 game to my PS5 because why would I play Valhalla on my PS4 at that point?
It's true.
And then it corrupted the game, and it went bye-bye.
Ooh.
Oh.
So
Ouch.
I didn't play it again.
I think the last time I played an Assassin's Creed game was when you could rent, or when they started renting video games through Redbox. And I would get a game and then just beat it in 24 hours and then return it.
Nice.
Okay.
They're back in my hometown. There's this video store that I'm surprised is still open today. When I was a kid, they were just across the bridge from my house, and so I would walk over every Saturday, and we would go and get a couple new games, and they had what was called the Quarter Club, where you would get these games for a quarter for a week.
Oh wow!
And it was the best. So we would go and we would get like 3 or 4 different games, and then come back, and then the next week we'd bring them back, and it was awesome.
That's pretty
Anyways.
impressive. Yeah.
Tangent.
Games for $1 for a week? Sure.
Yeah. It was great. And then we've also got Marvel Rivals, which Jane mentioned right before this. It's being put on by NetEase Games. I haven't heard of them before. Looking at their website, they have a bunch of failed projects. So, and most of them are Marvel related. There was Marvel's first mobile MOBA game called Super War, and they've recently started shutting down their servers. There's also Marvel Duel, which is a strategy card game, which seems to still be active. And then they've got a bunch of other like just mobile games. So I'm confused why they're doing a PC game. But Marvel Rivals is basically kind of like an Overwatch or a cheap version of Overwatch, maybe.
Overwatch Lite.
It's hard to say for sure because it's still in alpha right now. We're not going to see it until Q1 or Q2, I think it was, in 2025. So hopefully some graphic improvements by then. But based on the games the developer has put out, I'm not super confident in it.
Joy.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anybody have anything else before we get our X on? Because X is going to give it to you. It reminds me of one of my favorite pictures. I don't think that I have it available. Of somebody put a picture of DMX overlaid on a Professor X wheelchair. It's y'all going to make me use my mind. And I was like, thank you. I needed to see that.
Yes.
It makes me very happy every time I do see it.
That's amazing.
But okay, so let's jump in. So with X-Men 97, we return to the world of the X-Men 6 months after the end of the original series. Life has gone on. Scott and Jean have gotten married. Jean is slightly pregnant. Visibly pregnant. Yeah, ever so slightly. Which makes you wonder how far into the old series was she pregnant by the time they're like, oh, we got to go back a few months, because if Cable was born, if Nathan was born during this season, unless he was premature. Just saying.
It's close. It's close, though.
It's close. We're introduced to a character named Roberto DaCosta, who long-term Marvel Mutant fans will know as Sunspot from the X-Men's junior team, the New Mutants. And he is being held by everybody's favorite, the Friends of Humanity. Enter the X-Men, and they come in like gangbusters and save Roberto, bring him to the school. And it's very reminiscent of Jubilee's introduction to the X-Men in the original series, with the disbelief, the running away. There's a lot of parallels, and I think there was actually a very good choice on the studio's part to do this, because it brings you back very easily and comfortably into a universe that we haven't seen in almost 30 years before they start shaking things up a bit. We
30
find
years.
out that
Don't age us like that, Robert.
it ages me even more.
Hey.
Just throwing it out there.
30 years ago, I was 4 years old.
30 years ago, I was not.
Not going to go further.
Me neither.
I was many more than 4.
I was only 4 more than 4. So,
the X-Men go and track down who was it? Peter Gyrich, Henry Peter Garrich in jail and find out that their old friend Bolivar Trask is still up to no good creating Sentinels and Sentinel technology. They track him down in Northern Africa, and I get, as a Cyclops fan, I got a scene that I loved of Cyclops being Cyclops and using his powers in ways that's like, we've seen this in the comics. We've never really seen it quite like this in animation, and it was great. There was a big fight, which most people saw in the 2-minute teaser that they released prior to the episode airing. And good triumphs over evil for the moment. Everybody goes home. They're happy. And then all of a sudden alarms start going off because Magneto shows up. And he's like, oh, by the way,
Magneto.
all of this, mine. Chuck said so. He's got a book right here.
Did he look that good in the other series?
No.
Oh, no. He looked like 10 miles of rough road in the old series.
Because this Magneto was like, dang, Magneto.
No.
He
got a glow up.
That was very like Daddy Magneto vibes.
He got a glow up in the off season.
He really
Zaddy.
did.
Well, and I feel like they changed his look to look more like, what was it, House of M Magneto?
Yes.
Like very like just good looking.
Suave and debonair.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And everybody's like, they did.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what House of M is, but yes.
Listen, like I was sitting there watching, I was like, do I have like, did this like unlock something for me here, or what's going on? Like, do I have like sugar daddy things that I need like right now?
Oh my.
What's up?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would call him necessarily a sugar daddy.
I mean, I'd call him one with how he looks. So, I mean,
I'll call him whatever he wants me to call him.
Exactly.
I'm sure Rogue said the same thing.
Anyway, episode 2.
Anyway, so episode 2. Magneto.
Hot in here.
Magneto and his team start helping out people. Scott and Jean in the last episode had talked about leaving the team, but now with the turn that Magneto is the executor of Charles's estate, or is the beneficiary of Charles's estate, they kind of put the kibosh on that and are like, well, that may not be the best option. There's a scene at the United Nations where they are once again discussing the mutant problem. The Friends of Humanity show up. Once again. The Friends of Humanity show up once again, start causing trouble. And Magneto, you think at first is going to start going off the rails, but he's kind of he's being restrained. He's working with the X-Men to try and save people when all of a sudden one of the Friends of Humanity's operatives, the Executioner, comes in with a Sentinel technology gun and draws a bead on Magneto, but the beam is intercepted by Storm, shielding Magneto with her own body, and we discover loses her powers in the process, which was a parallel to a story in the X-Men where the government was chasing Rogue after she attacked a helicarrier. After she infiltrated a helicarrier. She didn't exactly attack it. And they were like, well, she needs to be stopped. They went to a character named Forge. We'll double back to this in just a moment. To have him create something to dampen her powers. He creates a gun. Storm takes that hit as well in the comics. Seeing Storm suffer and struggle, Magneto kind of loses it. He starts, he takes the Executioner, crucifies him upside down on a globe, picks up members of the United Nations Senior Council, and lifts them into the upper atmosphere. And the man has the look of, I have tried being nice. Y'all better try Jesus because you don't want to try me.
Try being nice for 2 seconds.
He tried being nice for 2 seconds. And he's like, it's very much like the scene in Pulp Fiction.
To be hit by that gun. Thank you very much.
But we get a great Pulp Fiction speech. We get a great Pulp Fiction next speech, like, I'm trying to be the shepherd here, but y'all are making it hard for me. A friend of mine had this vision, and I'm trying to live up to it, but you're making it hard to walk that line. And honestly, watching this, I expected him to just be like, so humanity is done now. But he didn't. He says, I'm going to walk that line because he had faith in me, and releases everybody. Everybody goes home. Storm is left to experience the world without powers, without being to sense the world around her the way that she has always done. And Scott and Jean are kind of like, well, this is great. And while everybody's having their aftermath party, they get a knock on the door. Enter Jean Grey.
Dun, dun,
End
dun,
scene.
dun.
Also during this, while Magneto is holding the UN Council hostage, Jean goes into labor. The Jean that we have been following goes into labor. A doctor refuses to help with the birth because you're mutants. So Rogue does the only thing she can do, becomes Insta-Doctor, delivers the baby, all is well. There are so many questions about propriety here and consent, but we're just going to leave that.
Yeah,
We're going to walk away from that and just go, it happened. It's not the best option, but this is what we got.
Desperate times, desperate measures, you know?
Definitely desperate times. And bouncing baby boy Nathan is born. Everybody, they get back to the mansion, knock on the door, and meet Jean. End credits. Episode 3, Fire Made Flesh. Beast has been doing what Beast does, and he's been sciencing the hell out of things, and discovers that they are both Jean, but the Jean that showed up at the door after everything was said and done is the older version of Jean. All of her cells date older than the Jean that is married to Scott and just had a baby. And people are just kind of like, so what's going on here? We find out that the X-Men's old villain, Mr. Sinister, is at work and has been dabbling with the DNA, and at some point replaced Jean with Jean, with a Jean clone. And we have no idea when. The Jean clone kind of goes a little off the rails. And is like, I'm tired of all the manipulation. I'm tired of all of this. Call me the Goblin Queen. Now, this is one of my bigger problems with this series is this episode, because they took what was basically a year and a half of comics and condensed it into 22 minutes, which didn't give people who were not familiar with the storyline and why would she call herself the Goblin Queen, and why by the end of this episode she say, call me Madeline Pryor. There's no context for this. Whereas in the comics, there had been actually, Madeline showed up years before the whole Goblin Queen incident, did marry Scott, did have a baby named Nathan. However, Jean was discovered after the Dark Phoenix saga alive in the bottom of the Hudson River. And Scott's like, I gotta go. And takes off to find Jean, leaving Madeline and Nathan in Alaska on their own to deal with Daddy just left. This was not the best writing in the comics ever. It set up a lot of angst between Jean and Madeline that did become to fruition to some degree in the Inferno storyline, which saw Madeline going to limbo, becoming a sorceress, and then going, I'm taking over everything. So without that kind of background, the episode Fire Made Flesh was very weird and jumped around a bit for some people. A lot of people kind of just did the magic hand wave and going, I don't care. But there is context available in all of the X adjacent titles in the, I believe it was like 87, 88 or somewhere around there. And it's like 30 something books total that cover this Inferno saga.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. To make a comment on that, Yeah, because like I'm someone that is not super familiar with the comics or even the prior series and stuff. I came into this series like very fresh. But like, yeah, this episode, yeah, now that you're like breaking this down, I'm like, yeah, you're right. That all of this, like, I have to say, like, overall, like, it was a cool episode. Like, it was there were a lot of really cool action scenes and all of that went on. But now that I'm thinking back on it, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that this all happened. Like, you know, now that this season has wrapped, it's like looking back, it's like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about all this, because it does kind of feel like it doesn't match, like it doesn't fit in with it all. And so yeah, it is too bad that they kind of super condensed this particular story into a smaller episode. But I guess what we had, you know, it was still really cool. It just kind of felt, yeah, it did feel very out of place.
It was rushed. It felt rushed.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like the run for Inferno in Marvel Comics across Uncanny X-Men, X-Factor, X-Terminators, Excalibur, and the New Mutants ran from October of 1988 to August of 89. So all of those books for all of those months were the Inferno tie-in. So you're missing 5 books: October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, 10. So you're looking at 55 books worth of backstory that was condensed into 22 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. But again, one of the things that was done really well in this was the body horror and the overall horror elements that they threw into this, and a lot of Japanese style horror animation went into especially the Goblin Queen sequences. They even gave her a magical girl transformation into the Goblin Queen.
That was pretty cool.
But they finally talked Madeline down, but not before Mr. Sinister has infected Nathan with a techno-organic virus, which threatens to consume him. The only option they have is to send him into the future with Bishop, and that's it for Nathan. So it's like, bye, baby Nathan. Have a nice life. Madeline is there to hand him off to Bishop. Scott can't handle that scene, so he just kind of walks away, which is interesting because Cyclops traditionally has had a problem with his father Corsair having abandoned him and lived an entirely different life on the far side of the galaxy without looking back. So seeing Scott do a similar thing, just kind of abandoning Nathan at this point, is the apple not falling far from the tree. But they do circle back to this a little later in the series. We find out that after Nathan is gone, Jean and Madeline have a moment as Madeline is leaving, and she says, "You know, we can't avoid each other. Can't really call each other Jean. What do we do?" And Madeline's like, "Just call me Madeline Pryor," and walks off like David Banner at the end of the Incredible Hulk series. As a epilogue, we get a scene of Storm in a bar, and she is approached by a gentleman whose name is Forge, who has been seen before in the original series, and he claims to be able to restore her powers, and they fade out here. We are given, for episode 4, we're giving 2 episodes in one, and they do a good job of doing both of those in roughly 15 minutes each. We get Motendo starring Jubilee and Roberto and Mojo and Spiral, and a character named Abscissa, who we come to learn is an alternate version of Jubilee, who was actually voiced by the original voice actress for Jubilee, who opted not to voice Jubilee in this because she wanted the part to go to an Asian American actress. And this basically feels like somebody had a copy of the X-Men video game stuck in a corner somewhere and said, that'd make a good episode. And then we're going to stick Jubilee and Sunspot in it. Go. And they did, and it was fun. It had silly moments. It had some dramatic moments. Mojo is always good for a bit of comedic relief, and for also introducing tension into the series, and he did that well. It was interesting to see Abscissa show up because she's had years of learning to use Jubilee's powers in a way that Jubilee hasn't in the virtual environment. And she actually teaches her a few things, which was kind of neat to see a little bit of growth for Jubilee that we have not really seen before. The second episode, or the second part of the episode, is called Life Death Part 1, which was an oddly accurate retelling of the story of Life Death from the Uncanny X-Men series. And it's where Forge has taken Storm off to try and restore her powers, but she finds out that he's the reason she lost the powers in the first place, and then begins not to trust him. Watching how they interact over this 15 minutes was good acting on everyone's part. And it also introduces a character called the Adversary, who plagued the X-Men for years in the comics. And it was nice to see a version of him that was spooky and scary in animation. And they did an admirable job of making
super creepy,
Oh,
him
yeah.
incredibly creepy and just scary and you know, the stuff of nightmares. And they used the character, I think I would say, better in this than they did in some ways in the comics, in just that those few moments or this short time. Let's see. Well, we've had the happy episodes. Now we're going to start getting into the heartbreak episodes.
Yeah.
Episode 5. Remember it. It opens with Jean being frustrated about not knowing whose memories are whose between her and Madeline, since both being telepaths, their memories, we find out, kind of bled into each other. So there's a lot of questions as to who remembers what. Actually, she talks about remembering, you know, Nathan's first cry, seeing his eyes, all of these things, but we know that that was actually Madeline. Unfortunately, we don't get Madeline's point of view for this, but we do find out that Jean has a psychic flash and realizes that Scott has been telepathically communicating with Madeline, who is off in Genosha at this point.
Oh boy.
Which is
Come on,
More than
Scott.
Cody.
That was like, if you want to talk about like emotional like cheating, like full on right there. Like, I get he was with this version of her and went through something, but they literally have the same memories, the same thoughts. Like, it's literally, to him, should be the same person,
but it's not, and it's looking the fragmentation of Scott and Jean's relationship and Scott and Madeline's relationship. I think that they handled it well. And I mean, because you could see that Scott's not sure what to do. He's reaching out to Madeline, by his admission, just to make sure that she's okay. This is also very reminiscent of something that happened in later issues of Uncanny X-Men, where Scott and Jean were having problems, and Scott was turning to Emma Frost for emotional support. Yeah, that did not go over very well. But they break from the Scott, Jean, Madeline triangle, and we find that Magneto, Rogue, and Gambit have gone off to Genosha to celebrate, where Genosha is going to ask Magneto to lead the country. And we see Nightcrawler for the first time in this series, and it is a light, happy, fun Nightcrawler, which we have not seen, which we didn't see in his appearances in the original series. He's very kind of somber, not quite morose, but very serious in his appearances in the original series. And seeing him here, he's teleporting around very similar to the way he did in X2 at the beginning, in the opening scene of that, where he's teleporting through the White House. They're giving you scenes of Genosha in the capital city, around the, I guess what would be the their version of the White House or the ruling house, Parliament House. And you're seeing people celebrating everything. There's cameos of characters from many generations of X-Men, including Dazzler, Glob Herman, Pixie. We do also see Emma Frost and Sebastian Shaw show up. And Magneto asks, Gambit's kind of questioning the whole, how's all of this working? While Rogue and Magneto are kind of like, can't you just be happy that people have a place to live and be free? And Gambit's kind of like, there's got to be something going on behind the scenes here.
There was.
And there just a little bit.
Should we talk about your girl Rogue?
Well, Rogue is at a crossroads.
Because she wants a little bit of sugar daddy.
Because she is, as the song says, torn between two lovers. Both because we discovered
Daddy Magnus.
Rogue and Magneto, it turns out, can actually touch. He is able to exert a electromagnetic shield around his body, allowing them to actually touch, which they show in flashback. And Gambit's kind of not having it. Gambit's like, well, third wheel, this is awesome. Not really awesome. And Magneto then asks Rogue, if I'm going to lead this country, they're going to need a queen. And Rogue is moments away from saying, I'm good with that. And then she realizes that she truly does love Remy and is about to go tell him this when everything hits the fan. And it's high-speed fan, and it's high-velocity everything. As Cable shows up, appears to Madeline Pryor, who has been in Genosha helping them with their with setting up the country, and he appears to her and says, "I'm sorry," and then disappears right before a wild Sentinel attack. And the wild Sentinel, if the Sentinels are, let's say, roughly 30 to 40 feet tall, this wild Sentinel is skyscraper sized, and it acts kind of like a master mold factory, dispensing more Sentinels. And it is making its way across Genosha through the capital city, massacring anything in its path. And we find Magneto is, if we thought he had enough at the UN 3 episodes back, he is done now. And he's just like, nope, this is not going to happen. And picks up a train and just starts whipping the Sentinel with it, which was one of the most beautiful things I've seen in animation in a long time.
It was great. It was great.
So good.
Just like, my pimp hand is strong. What? And unfortunately, not quite enough. The Sentinel,
not very effective.
It was not as effective as you would have hoped. I mean, sort of. He got a couple of good hits in, and the Sentinel's like, "Are you done?
What?
My turn? Bet. Let's do this." And it's game on, and the Sentinel raises the city. Rogue and Gambit have been trying to save people as they can, as in the path of the Sentinel, and then they decide to take the fight to the Sentinel itself. Good idea, bad idea. Because we lose Gambit to the Wild Sentinel in one of his last strikes, and Gambit is pierced to the side by a tentacle from the Sentinel, which he's just then, and the Sentinel's like, "You are no longer a threat," basically, and Gambit looks up and says, "The name, mon ami, is Gambit. Remember it." Reaches down, charges the tentacle, through the tentacle charges the Sentinel, and destroys it. And unfortunately, he is critically wounded in doing so. And then when Rogue finally finds him, she is touching him, bare skin, and her last words are, "I can't feel you," which is also reminiscent of Wanda and the Vision in Infinity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
just to kind of throw that tie in. Yeah.
Thanks for making it more depressing.
I mean, it is just for the way that this episode started on Genosha, seeing how happy and excited everyone was about the birth of a new nation, getting a new leader, making mutants, giving them their own presence in the world. It was a delight to watch that and watch Nightcrawler's joy at being reunited with his sister, at watching everyone with hope and joy. And the way they turned this into a nightmare and devastating, horrific destruction in such a short period of time and never pulling the punch. I mean, they showed the destruction of the not just the wild sentinel, but the smaller sentinels that it was sending through the city, just leveling anything in their path and anyone with no remorse, with no cause of, no sense of remorse. Being robots, they're not going to have a lot. But it was one of the things that I wasn't prepared for. And I don't think that anyone who was not associated with this show before it aired had any sense of they're going to do this. I figured that since we saw Genosha, we would see the destruction of Genosha. I didn't think it was going to show on screen at this scale. Anyone else?
I didn't think that they were going to lose anybody. I thought they were going to keep it a little bit more light and stuff, especially because it was a Disney Plus show. You're like, oh, it's just going to be it's going to be like the old Fox show, just not as many dark episodes.
Well, I mean, Disney Plus is becoming less and less like that.
Yeah,
especially with Hulu. Because if you have a Hulu subscription, all your content's in Disney Plus. You don't have to go over to Hulu to see it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so they're trying to just merge the platforms, which means a lot of the Fox properties that are usually a little more on the edgy side, we're seeing on the Disney Plus platform now.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, death, destruction, and wanton mayhem in Genosha. Film at 11. Our next episode is Life Death Part 2, and they kind of split this between the Forge and Storm story and a story where we finally find out that the professor did survive his shooting at the end of the original series and has been living with his space princess on the far side of the galaxy and is about to become her prince consort, much to the chagrin of the rest of the Empire. However, one of the conditions is you've got to renounce your ties to Earth and the X-Men. And Charles is like, but those are my children, and I can't just turn my back on them. And the Empire's like, choose. Lalandra's sister, Deathbird, stakes a claim for the throne, just like we can't have my sister bringing this, what do they call it, wanting to bring somebody whose ties to this backwater galaxy or backwater part of the galaxy are going to bring down the Empire. We're not having it. We get to see the Shi'ar Super Guardians, which is always kind of fun. One note, we also see a character named Vulcan, who turns out they did not say anything about him in this episode. They just showed him in one of the couple of the background shots. Vulcan is Cyclops and Havoc's youngest brother. But again, they make no mention of him at all, let alone his ties to the Summers family. So I'm curious to see if this shows up, if the Shi'ar show up again in season 2, if they will address that. Flipping back to the Forge and Storm story, Forge says that he can reverse. Forge has been poisoned by the adversary. The only cure is in a cave not far from Forge's ranch. And as he is slowly dying, he's trying to lead Storm to find where the cave is so she can extract the root and help to heal him. And they are beset again by the adversary. And again, they pull no punches in making him super creepy and just terrifying. They do play in on Storm's claustrophobia, which very often gets overlooked as a character trait in comics and in other series. They play upon that. Lo and behold, Storm is able to find the root, save Forge, and in the process rediscover something about herself, and doesn't need Forge to restore her powers because her powers effectively reignite inside her. And during this, she gets her own magical girl transformation into her classic giant-size X-Men #1 costume, which is the black bikini with the tiara that most people from the comics were familiar with her in. And she seems to have undergone a bit of a rebirth spiritually as well. And, oh, hey, look, we find out that Larry Trask somehow has escaped custody after the X-Men captured him in Africa and is making Sentinels again because that's what he does.
What a stinker.
At least he's consistent. So, episode 7, titled Bright Eyes, opens with a funeral for Gambit. And we have Nightcrawler, and I'm delighted that he actually kept him as a devout Catholic and as a priest, which is canon in the comics, and had him giving a celebration of life, not just a funeral sermon. And he celebrated Gambit in a wonderful way. That showed that he knew a little bit more about Gambit than we might have thought from the lack of times we actually saw them together, but that he understood Gambit, and that was kind of fun to see. But following this, Rogue is very much in the middle of PTSD over Gambit's death, and I believe at this point, Magneto's apparent death, and decides, I'm done waiting, I'm taking action. And she goes and tracks down Henry Gyrick, absorbs his memories, finds out the Trask is still alive in Madripoor, which is one of Wolverine's old stomping grounds. She travels to Madripoor. Traveling to Madripoor, she goes to a military base and has a run-in with the U.S. Army and General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, which was someone I was not expecting to see. It was delightful to see them cross him in. And she basically walks in to the base just like, I'm here. Where's Trask? Where's Gyrick? And it leaves no stone unturned. She winds up then going to a remote cabin for more information and runs into a certain Star-Spangled Avenger. And you're just like, well, this is not going to end well for anybody. And before it comes to serious blows, Rogue is like, she's like, well, are you on the mutant side? And Captain America is like, my hands are tied. At which point she looks at him and goes, well, if your hands are tied, you're not going to need this. Straight up takes his shield, flies out of the cabin,
Frisbee toss.
Looks at him like, I want you to see what I'm doing, and does a frisbee toss into the distant mountains with his shield. Just like, there you go. I'm out.
And it flies away. Bye.
She just eated that thing.
And the look on his face to me was kind of like, I deserve that. Trying to figure out where she threw it is going to suck.
Now I've got to go get it.
Well, I better go get my shoes on.
Rogue flies to Madripoor, finds Trask, just as the X-Men had finally figured out where she's going, as she has Trask by the collar hanging over the edge of a building, and is basically interrogating him Batman style, which is not what you expect from Rogue. And then, not quite Batman style, because Batman would at least put a rope on somebody, lets him go. And the X-Men are mortified. And she has just like, I did what I had to do. You guys were just sitting on your hands. Somebody had to act. Which, if that had been the end of the story, would have been one thing. Trask comes back as a Prime Sentinel and proceeds to wreak his revenge upon Rogue and the X-Men, and holds his own handily. They are finding out that about Operation OZT, which has ties to a character who is revealed, I believe, in the next episode. Nope, in this episode, at the end. And one of the, I guess, red herrings that they threw out was they showed a picture of this person's lower face, and it's pinkish purple, which I know led a lot of people to think the Purple Man is going to show up. And it is, in fact, instead, the X-Men's, one of their villains, Bastion, who is in this incarnation, a cyborg, a technopathic cyborg. Originally, he was a melding of the Master Mold and a Master Mold and a Sentinel named Nimrod, who went through a device called the Siege Perilous and emerged as Bastion, who is human-sized, able to look fully human, and then exhibit Sentinel technology traits. We find out that Sinister and Bastion have been working with, Sinister and the OZT, which is Operation Zero Tolerance program, have been working with Bastion to solve the mutant problem. As Bastion is pretty much wiping up the streets of Madripoor with the X-Men, Cable shows up, drops an EMP, disabling Bastion, and they discover that the ties that Sinister and Bastion have, and reveals that Cable reveals that Xavier is still alive, and that Magneto we find out that Magneto survived the attack on Genosha and is currently Bastion's prisoner. A couple of things about this episode: it was interesting to watch Rogue cut loose in different ways, and it was also fun to watch how the animators showed this, because they used a couple of very anime-specific moves for her power set. There's a scene where she's fighting at the Hulkbuster base and does a flying, spinning roundhouse kick against a tank. And you're just like, oh, that, and the way they animated it was super exaggerated limbs for a very short portion of the scene, but enough that you could see it and go, that's not just foreshortening of limbs, that's definitely an anime exaggerated style. Watching her take on Captain America and not flinch, watching her take on Thunderbolt Ross and not flinch, and then watching her drop Trask off a building and like, I don't care. Couldn't care less. I have zero to give right now. Because this man has worked my nerves.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting for me to see Rogue in this way, because I mean, you guys have to realize, like, the Rogue that I know, it comes from the X-Men live action movies. And she's kind of annoying in those movies, in my opinion. She doesn't really do much except whine. I don't know. That's just my opinion. And also, it's been a minute since I've watched those. But just thinking back, like, I mean, she's not the same Rogue as we saw in X-Men 97. And I'm sure she was cool in 96 as well. But it was just cool to like see that like she has more powers, like, or just to see better use of her powers. Yeah. But also like to see that she's got a little bit of a dark side going on, you know? So I thought that was definitely unexpected in this episode. I mean, clearly she is hurting. She
Yes.
just lost those two guys, those two people that she was kind of deciding between, you know. She lost both of them in the same battle.
Yeah.
Right.
So, not to excuse murder, but it's a little. Well, she dropped a guy off the side of a building with the intent.
She didn't kill him. She didn't kill him. It was gravity. Actually, it was a sudden stop at the end that would have killed him.
Oh, okay.
She just assisted.
Okay.
Yeah.
She
So
just
it was
pushed. Okay. Anyways.
Physics killed him.
Physics killed him. There you go.
Oh, dear.
Science killed him.
We're gonna get ourselves in trouble, you guys.
Well, now all of the kid gloves are off because now people are transforming into prime sentinels because it turns out that Bastion has infected a lot of people with his prime sentinel program. And basically we find out that he's like, all mutants have to die. He has a special issue against the X-Men because he feels that Xavier abandoned him, as we learned that Charles had actually visited Bastion's mother in his youth when he first found out that Bastion had some sort of powers as a technopath. And his mother was like, nope, you're not taking my child. And basically Bastion felt that the X-Men had or Xavier specifically had abandoned him. So he's got a mad on for Xavier. We find Jean, Scott, and Cable, Summers family, the broken Summers family, travel to Bastion's hometown and are set upon by a town full of prime sentinels, in which case we see them finally go like, well, we cannot defeat them this way. We have a great superhero moment where, Cable and Scott, father and son, they're not having a bonding moment necessarily, but they're like, we need to survive this. And along with Jean, who has been treating Nathan like her child, because for her memories and everything, he is, and genetically also is. And Cable's like, you're not my mom. I don't have to listen to you. Very petulant child. I'm just like, okay, grow up, Nathan. And finally, all of the world leaders are kind of like, well, we have to do something about this mutant problem because Magneto has resurrected asteroid M and put it in orbit over the Earth, and that's just a threat. So what do? They're going to launch nuclear missiles at Magneto, which is exactly what you want to do to a guy who controls electromagnetic fields. Yeah. Seems like, good idea, bad idea, way on the bad idea.
Yeah.
Magneto in retaliation is like, oh, so this is how it's going to be, and sets off an EMP that basically turns off every electric and electronic device on the planet, sending the Earth into a animated version of NBC's Revolution, and it's not good for anybody. The professor has a meeting with now President Kelly and was like, you need to give me 12 hours to try and talk him down and reverse this. And President Kelly's like, you maybe have 2 hours. So the X-Men split up. Half the team's going to look for Bastion, half the team's going to Asteroid M, and all hell breaks loose on both sides. The team going after Bastion did not count on finding Mr. Sinister working with Bastion there, as Mr. Sinister then possesses Cable, who has a telekinetic fight with Jean, and Cable doesn't pull the punch because you're not my mom. So he's just like, well, I don't have to be soft and delicate with you because you're not her. And basically, Jean is trying not to hurt her child. And Cable's like, I'm having none of that. Deal with it. And we question whether or not he kills her at one point. On Asteroid M, things are not going any better. The team fighting Magneto is fighting him to a bit of a standstill. Well, not quite a standstill, because it turns out that Sunspot and Rogue have joined him because they're like, Magneto was right. And but they're the team of X-Men do not want to hurt their companions, but well, it's all hands on deck at this point. And finally, the professor's like, I don't want to have to do this, but I will control your mind, and I will stop this somehow. And in the process of doing this, Wolverine taking a page from the Fatal Attraction series, stabs Magneto, and Magneto's like, why do you keep throwing a man with a metal skeleton at me? Let me show you why that's a bad idea. And goes and removes all of the adamantium from Wolverine, which they do not resolve by the end of this series, which
No.
I think is going to play into season 2 and Feral Wolverine, which will be interesting to see. But Xavier does manage to get Magneto's helmet off. Xavier takes control of his mind, reverses the EMP, but it breaks Magneto's mind in the process. And I believe that most people at this point thought that we were going to see another overpowered X-villain show up, Onslaught. Marvel, however, and Marvel Animation was just like, that's what you all thought. We're going this way instead. Magneto recovers as asteroid M is now falling out of orbit, helps the X-Men stop its descent, put it back into orbit just in time for it to explode. As Bastion has decided, rather than try to find a way to live with mutants, I would rather die, and I will take you all with me, and destroys asteroid M's gravity core and is sucked into the singularity that is created by its destruction. And we are left with a world without X-Men because they all disappear. We flash forward a little bit to the ruins of the Xavier Institute with Forge working in one of the labs as Bishop shows up. And as neither Forge nor Bishop have met each other, there's almost a superhero fight. We got about that close to one. And the Bishop's like, they're not dead. They're lost in time. Flash forward. We see first Scott and Jean appear in 3,000 years in the future. And they are beset upon by Clan Ascani, led by Mother Ascani. And they see a young preteen boy with a metal arm and a glowing eye, and realize this is Nathan in the far future. Cuts to the other half of the team that was on Asteroid M in the distant past, in Egypt in 3000 BC. And as they are discovering where they are and learning about when they are, they come across someone who is being beset upon by members of his tribe for being different. They save him and find out that this person's name is Ensaba Noor, who is the birth name of Apocalypse.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. And just before all the credits fade to black, we return to the ruins of Genosha, where a large blue hand picks up a single playing card and makes a statement about needing horsemen. Fade to black. So they're setting up a number of different things for season 2, including Apocalypse and his horsemen. It looks like we will have time travel adventures, buddy cop movie with Bishop and Forge, and possibly a new team of X-Men to help this quest, which I'm hoping are not actually X-Men, but either the New Mutants or Generation X. And they packed a lot into 10 episodes, and it was, like I said, it was a warm, fuzzy, happy place coming into this. And then they were just like, so we've got you comfortable. Now we're going to shake things up. And they just didn't stop shaking it until the very end. We got a lot of neat cameos and appearances from characters across the Marvel Universe, especially in the last 3 episodes, where we see Captain America and Iron
Daredevil.
Man, Daredevil, Cloak and Dagger, Mr.
Panther.
Fantastic, Black Panther, which has been controversial because a lot of people are like, is it T'Chaka or T'Challa? Despite the fact that the president specifically says T'Chaka. And a lot of people have been trying to tie it into the MCU, saying that it would make sense for it to be T'Chaka, as T'Challa would still be a child. This is not the MCU. T'Challa has appeared in 90s era's cartoons, but they have not explained one way or the other where T'Challa is, or if he is also acting as the Black Panther with his father as king. So there's a number of things there.
We did also see, though, what's that guy's name?
Doctor Strange.
No,
You see
the
Doctor
guy.
Strange.
You see Bishop come in to the room at the end, and they've got like that
The poster.
the poster boards, and they've got like all the different mutants listed, and you see Scarlet Witch on there, and hers says Off-World.
Mm-hmm. Which would make sense if she was with the Avengers at this point.
Yeah.
But we also get who's the other cameo that I was about to name drop? X Factor.
Oh, yeah.
X Factor and possibly Cecilia Reyes from the 2000s X-Men, Uncanny X-Men. So I mean, they didn't really they played. Oh, I'm sorry. The cameo that a lot of people were kind of were not expecting. Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson.
Yeah.
Which apparently resolved a cliffhanger ending from the end of the Amazing Spider-Man series, as Mary Jane was apparently lost in time and space, which I was not aware of, but I'm happy that everybody can have that little bit of closure now.
Closure that they are. They found each other again.
Yeah, people are theorizing heavily on this cameo that like, oh, does this mean we're gonna get a new or a reboot of a Spider-Man series? Exactly. So
I hope that they just do another continuation of the Amazing Spider-Man.
Well, as it stands, Christopher Daniel Barnes, who voiced that Peter Parker in Spider-Man, he says that he has not been approached by Marvel or Disney, but that he is open to it if they decide to go that route. So it seems like the door is at least halfway open to that happening. So, what were some of your reactions to just this? Now, Marlee, as somebody who did not watch the original series and came into this kind of cold, what were your thoughts about characters that you're familiar with, mainly from the movies, showing up and how they were treated in this?
Yeah. Coming into this cold, I mean, honestly, I was pretty hesitant because I'm really picky about my animated series, as I've mentioned before on this podcast. But it was also just like a fun show to watch with my husband. And it was also fun, like each week as a new episode came out, it's like, oh, let's watch this, So it was like a lot of fun, but like I immediately got hooked, and I enjoyed seeing some familiar characters, because I enjoy the X-Men movies, the live action, I know they're not perfect. I know that they're a little out there sometimes and whatnot, but like they're still just like fun action movies, and I grew up with them. But seeing familiar characters as well as getting to know some new ones. And also I actually really did like the animation style, and like they did such a good job, especially with like action sequences. It was just really, really like high quality. Like it was just really nice to watch. So it was just like it was fun to kind of see some different stories of X-Men kind of interwoven together. And it's just been fun to kind of hear what everybody else has thought of it too, especially people who are more familiar, and everyone just like being like excited about it and impressed. So that also kind of helped build up the hype for me too, is just seeing everybody else's reactions as well.
Yeah, a lot of times we get stuff like this, and it's out the far window, right? It's a far miss from the standard. And this, I mean, they got the original writer, which they later on fired after he wrote both seasons,
Mhm.
which seems a little sketch to me. But
Poor guy.
But yeah, I mean, we get a lot of the original voice actors back, and like the show was just phenomenally put together. It didn't miss a single beat. It felt like.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it like, especially there at the end, with all these cliffhangers that we're left with, like it makes me really excited to get into season 2 whenever it comes out.
Yeah. And this time we didn't have to wait until Saturday morning cartoons and hope that we don't miss it. Because, back then we couldn't even TiVo.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
What about you, James? What are some of your thoughts about the 97, and did it hit for you? Did it miss?
Oh my gosh. Like, I loved a lot. There was so much I loved about this. I loved the heavy takes on a lot of stuff, especially when you get to the last episodes with Xavier and Magneto, when they're like trapped in Magneto's mind and they forget who they are and they're having their conversations with each other. And then they're in that room with that water all filling up the room and stuff. And like Charles is trying to tell Magneto, like, hey, I'm here for you no matter what. If we go down, we'll rise up together. Like, I didn't think I was going to go into this crying. But I watched that episode and I was just bawling the entire time watching that whole sequence play out. Just because, you get to see a little bit more of that friendship that they talk about in the original series. And even they bring it up a little bit in this newer one. Like, there's a reason why Charles had that in his will, that Magneto would take over the X-Men. And you really get to see the connection and why that is. Because they are brothers to Xavier. They just went down different paths.
One of the things Marlee made a point about, by watching the movies and being familiar with the X-Men from that and then coming into this cold, I had a bit of a reverse today. So my girls have seen the X-Men old series, and one of my daughters watched the 97 with me this season, and we just introduced them to the first live action X-Men movie today. After they were kind of like, well, it looks different. It doesn't look like quite the same. We're like, well, it's not the same, but the characters, so you'll be able to understand, at least, have that going in. And after 2 days of skepticism about watching it, we watched it tonight. And as soon as the movie ended, my oldest daughter was like, so when are we watching the sequel? At which point I'm just going to like, yes. Because she gets to the better movie now. Because they only made 2 X-Men movies.
Yes.
Only.
Yes. Agreed.
I'll say 3 if you want to count First Class, maybe. But yeah, as far as the
Class.
First Class has its issues, but we can.
They all do. They all do.
X2 is perfect. What are you talking about? X2 is perfect.
I mean,
you know what my favorite one is?
I swear to God, if you say X3, we're ending this thing right now.
Oh, but I will say, speaking of Days of Future Past, I love how in that little Bishop Forge sequence, how they have that callback to the poster with all the mutants on it.
From X-Men 141.
Yeah, I loved that. I was like, oh, they did it. They did the thing.
They did a lot of the thing in this show.
They did.
That, especially if one of the things that they did very well was that if you were not a fan or a reader of comics or had not seen the movies, you didn't have a very huge barrier to entry. But if you've got the background with the characters, whether from the movies, the comics from the old series, there were so many things that were thrown in as Easter eggs and nods to different things that were just nice touches and showed that not only were these people who grew up with the series, but loved the series and know what people would appreciate seeing as fans of the series without going too heavy-handed with it. As I've mentioned, the first episode, watching Cyclops as he's coming in to save Roberto from the Friends of Humanity, use his force beams to maneuver around a room, or as part of his fighting style, because he's been trained to do this since he was like 15. So he's going to have picked up some techniques of how to integrate your power set into your fighting style. And just watching that first episode, I was jaw on the floor. And then when he does his superhero landing using his beams to slow his descent, granted, he would have broken his neck, but that's not the point. He got the superhero landing, and because when the blackboard gets destroyed, and he's falling. He is very calm and just like, it's another day ending in Y. And you're watching the Flyers get everybody but him, and you're kind of like, ground's coming up. You might want to move a little faster here. And he's just like, I'll see you on the ground. And you're just kind of like, you didn't have a parachute. What are you talking about? And watching him use his powers to descend was actually, I remember I saw something today that reminded me the reverse of something they did, where Wolverine had been launched into the air and there was nobody to catch him, and Scott used his beams to slow his descent enough for him not to die on impact. So I'm like, okay, these are people who've read the comics, who've done the work, and are giving us what I'll call good fan service, not just pat you on the head fan service. So to the entire writing staff, the creative teams behind this, the animators, solid job. I mean, they gave us a show that brought back nostalgia, but also moved the story forward in an organic way, and gave us elements that, that played off of some of the comics, some of the movies, because there was a scene in Tolerance's Extinction Part 2 where Scott gives Cable an X-Men uniform, and Cable kind of looks at it, and Scott goes, "What did you want? Black leather?" Which was funny because as we're watching the X-Men movie tonight, my daughter, as soon as Wolverine starts commenting about the black leather outfits, and Cyclops goes, "What did you want? Yellow spandex?" She just turns and looks at me, and I go, "Yes, it is that reference exactly." And she just kind of grinned and went back to watching the movie.
I love it.
So thank you, Marvel and Disney, for giving us a bit of our childhoods back, or our youth back, a bit of nostalgia and just solid storytelling with this series. You've left so many things open for season 2, having completely blown the onslaught angle out of the water, because I was one of the people who was in the bandwagon of, yeah, we're getting Onslaught. Charles is going to shut down Magneto's mind. We're getting Onslaught as season 2 villain, and they completely misdirected that, and in a beautiful way. So I'm not going to try and speculate too much about what's coming in season 2. I'm going to just sit, bowl of cereal in hand, just like, I'll just wait for it to come in Saturday morning all over again.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any closing thoughts?
It was solid. I mean, it's definitely a show for anyone. You don't have to have, I feel like you don't have to have that much X-Men background knowledge to enjoy a story, to enjoy this story. I mean, because they do a pretty good job throughout the episodes of, giving you snippets of each character, or, whatever character they're focusing on and stuff, to understand what's going on. Like, there's really not that much you really need to know before watching this show. So like, I think it's also a great opportunity to maybe introduce someone to X-Men or your child, if you're wanting them to get into it a little bit more too. So yeah, I like that. I like how it's It's for everyone. Like, again, you don't have to like be like some huge X-Men comic buff to enjoy this show. But I'm sure you do enjoy it if you still are an X-Men comic buff, right? Like, it's
Very
for all
much so.
sorts of fans. It's
Yeah.
for every level of fan.
And that is,
So, I like
think it's
that.
an excellent summation of it. James, Collin?
I think that perfectly summed up everything for me. Like, I loved everything about it. I think anybody who watches it will love it. Yeah, it's just great storytelling.
Yeah, you get that mix of nostalgia. You get that mix of knowing that these characters are moving on and still saving the world, and saving the world.
Well,
I
yeah.
don't know, because
Yeah, no.
because they're destroying the world as well.
They're fixing their messes.
I mean, who knowingly puts their psychotic brother in charge of the X-Men, and then Genosha, and it's just
I would
doesn't
do
seem like a great fit.
He wasn't psychotic at the time.
for 2 seconds.
Hey, it was a good 2 seconds, though. That was the best 2 seconds ever.
It's fine. It's fine.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we hope that you enjoyed this recap of season 1 of X-Men 97. Please be sure to, if you have anything that you'd like to add to the discourse, join us on our Discord, which should pop up any moment now.
Yes, the discourse on Discord.
Join us in
Yes.
chat there at nope, that's not it.
Age of Geek.
That's not it either. ageofgeek.discord.
Got you.
Discord.ageofgeek.com. I always get that backwards.
Crushed it.
Yeah, read the banner. Don't listen to me. But join us there. We would love to hear your take on X-Men 97 or any of the other media that you're consuming. But until next time, I'm Robert.
I'm Marlee.
I'm
And
James.
those are Collin.
I'm Collin. Goodbye, my X-Men.
To me, my X-Men.
Have a great one. Thank you for joining us.
This has been an Age of Geek media production.